as much of the mad and macabre as they were to see that day.
Became a nightmare. I'm gonna do a walkthrough.
Over 1,300 pieces of evidence were collected from the crime scene.
Scratch marks along the wall.
There was no doubt something paranormal was going on.
And for that exact reason, I'll continue my research to drive away the darkness.
All right, welcome back to ASEP Radio. My name is Ben Robison, and tonight's guest is Neil McNeill. Neil McNeill is a local parapsychologist out of the Pacific Northwest here. I met Neil, it was, at least 2 years ago, in 2012, back at the Oregon Ghost Conference, where he spoke about general parapsychology. It's always been something I've been very fascinated with, and constantly am trying to incorporate into my way of investigation and research in the paranormal field. Now, to give you a little bit of background about Neil, Neil began his serious study of paranormal phenomena through an association with a noted California parapsychologist. You might all recognize his name as Lloyd Auerbach. This was back in 1993. So after 7 years of independent research, Neil began a 2-year stint as a lead investigator for the Washington State Ghost Society. Since 2004, Neil has served as an investigative consultant to the Evergreen Paranormal Group, as well as a parapsychology consultant for television and film. Neil is a member of the International Parapsychological Association, the Ryan Research Institute, and the Seattle Consciousness Education and Research Society. Neil is also pursuing advanced studies in parapsychology with the Australian Institute of Psychological Research. It's a mouthful all in one in general. Neil's got college-level courses in paranormal investigation that cover the story of North County's Journal, October 2009 issue, and made Seattle Metropolitan Magazine's list of best and most sought-after adult education classes in the Seattle area. Neil's work has also been featured on King 5's Evening Magazine, Como 4 News, as well as KO Radio and front page article in the Seattle Times. So in addition to his work as a parapsychologist, Neil is a certified reflexologist, Reiki practitioner, and an instructor at Seattle Reflexology and Massage Center. I have to tell you, Neil, right off the bat, there's so much just really big words in there. That's a hard one for me. But that was fun. That was awesome.
It just makes the work that I do sound important, you know.
I know. No, it is. It's very important. And before I forget, thank you very much for taking the time to be a guest on the show and sit down and talk with me.
Well, I really appreciate it. I appreciate the offer. You and I have always had really interesting conversations in the past, a couple 3 years we've known each other. And I'm looking forward to the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight.
Definitely. Yeah. And, you know, there was a couple people that stood out to me, you know, that year, and you were definitely one of them. I personally, you know, I've always wanted to study further and keep trying to keep up with it. Now, someday I'm going to probably get really serious about it and maybe join one of the organizations that is a part of parapsychology. And not only that, someday I'm going to make that trip up there and sit down and go through some of your lectures or classes as well. I know I've even benefited from some of your talks, as well as you have that video out, Dark and Stormy Nights, if I'm correct.
Right.
So I urge people to go out there and look for that as well. Great video, good, you know, get you right into the mix and bring you up to speed on terminology and common knowledge and history as well. So Neil, let's kind of go into, because you're my, you know, a first time guest on the show, I like to start with everybody's genesis on the world of paranormal or supernatural phenomena, whatever one you want to delve into or maybe even happen first. So give us a little background on you.
That's that thing. Well, first you were born. Yeah.
That's a supernatural phenomena in its own.
Right there. Yeah, exactly. No, I've always, like most people, I think, in the field, I've always had a pretty keen interest in anything you could consider to be paranormal. As a kid, I read the horror novels and comic books and went to the movies, that sort of thing. And we even had a family ghost in the house, actually, that would appear
Really?
Once or twice a year, that sort of thing. But I kind of always had the interest in it. It wasn't really until the early 1990s. I was a radio DJ back in the San Francisco area. And I had a guest on my show by the name of Lloyd Auerbach. And of course, most people probably are familiar with Lloyd's work. He pretty much wrote the book on field investigation and parapsychology and how to work that in to your field investigations. He wrote that back in the mid 80s. So I had a chance to interview this guy, and I had no idea what I was in for in that interview. I really didn't. It was supposed to be a short little interview, and it went on for well over an hour and a half, something like that.
Wow.
It was really incredible, and he was very nice. He indulged me in all the questions I had. Excuse me, because I had no idea that there was this science called parapsychology. I didn't know that scientists were actually studying this under controlled conditions and trying to come up with theories for this stuff. Had no idea that this existed. And fortunately, at the time, he was on the staff faculty at JFK University, which was at the time running a university level program in parapsychology. So you could actually do graduate work in parapsychology through this program. And he invited me to sit in on some lectures that he was in charge of. And I got to talk with some of the students, and I got to see what they were studying, and it just blew my mind. And I was hooked. That was it. I thought, this is amazing. So I started reading all of his books, and I started, getting my hands on anything that I could read, and really starting to take a look at the paranormal from a very scientific view.
Right.
To be able to go out and do this for a living, that wasn't in the cards for me at the time. I had no idea that I'd be doing this. Flash forward 20 years later, I had no idea that I'd actually be making a living lecturing and talking about this stuff. But that's basically where it all started for me, was just that meeting with him and realizing that there was a whole other world.
So you didn't have any experiences as a child or even maybe as a young adult that would have maybe shaped you or at all? You just literally had this conversation with Lloyd.
I was pretty much a dud. I think as far as my paranormal experience early on goes, like I said, my sister was the one that had the experience with the family ghost, so I wasn't really in on that except tangentially.
Yeah.
And we weren't supposed to talk about it, as kids, that kind of thing. Other than my interest, I had what I might nowadays consider to be a little bit of precognitive ability, just having a little bit of foreknowledge or deja experience, that sort of thing, but really nothing to write home about. No, it wasn't until then that I really started getting into this and stuff started to click.
Well, and you kind of segued beautifully right into it. So you're fascinated. Your interest is piqued after sitting down and attending this lecture or class that Lloyd was holding. Now, from that point, how did you progress to where you are now?
With great difficulty. It was a self-study, basically, because at the time, as I said, the JFK University program, that was the only place in the country where you could get any information at all on parapsychology, on the science of psychic phenomena. And by the time that I was ready to get into this kind of full bore, that program had disbanded. So
Really?
there really was no place at all to get this.
Can I ask why it disbanded? Do you know?
I don't know all the details. I think it had probably just run its course.
Okay.
When it had been operating for several years at the time that I met Lloyd.
Okay.
And there was certainly interest in it because they definitely had full classes and whatnot. But as an instructor myself, I know that these things come and go.
Sure.
So basically, it was really self-study. I would find out who was doing the research, look at their bibliographies, their suggested reading, and just kind of immerse myself in all of the scientific studies and all of the ghost story books. I took it from both angles. I mean, I really love reading stories about haunted castles in Scotland and Hans Holzer's stuff, all that fun stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And then temper it with all the research that's actually being done. So honestly, 10, 15 years worth of just straight reading and talking to people.
Right.
Kind of educating myself on the topic. And it wasn't really until I moved up to the Seattle area from San Francisco back in 1996 or so. That's when I actually joined the Washington State Ghost Society, which was being run by Henry Bailey at the time. And I didn't know that there were groups that you could join. This was a whole new territory to me.
How did you even learn about them?
I found out about them online. That was
okay.
That was basically
wow. Back in the AOL, you just dialed up
and AOL days. That was
see, people. This has been around a long, long time.
Well, so have I. So, and that's basically how I found out about it. And so I went to one of their open meetings, and I met with Henry and a couple of their senior members, and really liked their approach. And that's how I started to get the practical experience of actually going out into the field and doing the investigation. So I was working with them for a while. I became lead field investigator for them. Was doing investigations every single week or weekend.
If I may ask real quick, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm kind of curious, right? So we're talking in the late 1990s.
Right.
What style, in comparison to probably what most people default to in their minds, what style of investigating were they doing then?
All different kinds, I can tell you. I don't know that there's really that much difference between what's being done now and what was being done then, with the exception of the level of professionalism.
Okay.
With the level of control that's been introduced more and more now. Because you have to remember, at that time, Ghost Hunters was big on television, that sort of thing, where all of the reality television programs were just on the cusp of that sort of thing.
Right.
And so everybody was wanting to go out with their flashlight at night and investigate, the old coal mine. And there weren't a lot of controls. There wasn't a lot of science. There wasn't a lot of research or data that was being gathered. It was more the experience.
Yeah. Thrill seeking.
Basically, yeah, to put it that way, yeah. I tend to be a little more charitable, but that's basically what it amounted to. And Lord knows I've done that myself. The tailgater at the cemetery on a Friday night. Hey, I've done that, and that's a lot of fun.
And in all seriousness, I think we all, for the most part, have. It's just a matter of recognizing, well, what is my real true intention here? Is it to just get a thrill every time, or am I here for the long haul to research and help others and to collect and catalog, data to help further the research? So yeah, I've been there myself. Everybody I know has too.
Yeah, I think it's all about the motivation, and to be honest, everybody's got to start somewhere.
Exactly.
We can't just all fall out of the box and do a university program and get a grant and be doing lab research and paranormal investigation, that sort of thing.
I wish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do.
If I could make the money I make in my normal job doing this, paranormal research, oh man, that would be my dream job, hands down.
In my classes, I often get students who ask, where can I start doing this? How can I do this as a living? Because you're doing this, you're doing the lecture circuit and all that sort of thing. And it's like I tell them, there are fewer, I think at this point, there are fewer than 50 full-time parapsychologists in the world, making their living, paying their bills, doing the research, less than 50. So you've got a better chance of being a rock star than you do of being paid, to do this for a living. It's not easy.
Well, I know my singing voice, so I better lean towards parapsychology. So, all right. So it's in the 90s. You're working with the Washington State Ghost Society. So from there, you went.
From there, I had been working. It ended up being that I was actually working with kind of a core group of the membership at that point. And we clicked, we got along very well. We sort of intuitively knew what we were doing and how to work together. At that point, the WSGS was kind of going in a different direction than I was wanting to go. And so we just kind of very amicably parted company to form what became known as the Evergreen Paranormal Group. There were about 5 of us at the time. And this is basically all that we did, go out and do the investigations and try to do it from the controlled investigation method.
Sure.
We weren't really working with a lot of technology at the time. I'm not a tech person. I never have been. I tend to break equipment. Equipment tends not to work for me. It's just my energy field or something. I don't know what. But I'm not heavy into the tech. I'm more about the human experience part of it. So my strengths are really on the interview process and trying to figure out, how to work things that way, and working with psychics and mediums as well.
Well, I can tell you, I'm very tech, and I break stuff. I mean, I think the stuff we work with is crap most of the time. So I don't think it's really meant to last much. But
it's
anyways,
usually not meant to go out in the field doing ghost investigations.
No,
for the most part.
Exactly.
So it's doing the best it can.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we were actually so successful with our little group at that point that we were doing the investigation. We were doing up to 4 or 5 investigations a month. We all had full-time jobs at that point, and we just didn't have the time. We were actually having to refer cases out, and I know a lot of groups, they have that situation as well. It was at that point, round about, I think, 2003, that we were contacted by Port Gamble, which is an historic town up here on the peninsula. Some folks, I'm sure, are familiar with Port Gamble. Shanna Smith, who was the property manager for the town, actually contacted us, wanting to know if we'd be interested to come out and take a look. So we did, and Evergreen Paranormal went out, and we basically stayed. We were there for a couple of years we were the only people doing investigation out there. So we were logging everything, we were getting the data, we were doing the interviews with people, we were working with the property management who had been keeping track of everything that had been going on in the town. For those not familiar with the paranormal background of Port Gamble, for my money, it's the most haunted town in Western Washington. It's an historic town, so a lot of the buildings are preserved very well, and virtually every public building has activity associated with it, and a lot of the private buildings as well. So we had like the golden opportunity. This was like our Borley Rectory for Harry Price. This was our opportunity to go out and for a long period of time observe paranormal phenomenon, how it was changing and what was going on.
Well, damn, you're making me really kick myself right now, because I literally had to shoot Pete. Pete Orbia now is kind of managing a lot of everything that goes on with regard to Port Gamble. And he invited me to the Port Gamble Ghost Conference that's going to be held at the end of October this year. I had to turn it down just because I'm going to have my children that weekend.
Oh, no, we're going to miss you. I was really hoping you were going to be able to make it.
Yeah, I know. He wanted me to speak, and I was looking forward to it. But, schedules didn't match. And, my children, of course, as everybody understands, they must come first. And without any regret, it's just I've been wanting that opportunity to get out there and check it. Because, I know very much about Port Gamble as well. and I've never been there yet. So
We've
looking forward to the day.
Yeah, we've got to get you up there.
Yeah. So anyways, I didn't mean to interrupt, but you were saying you guys were up there, you got that opportunity.
Yeah, and basically I think we did that for 2 years or so, and again, just kind of the not the group dynamics, but the group itself. Everybody's got a life, and like you just said, family comes first, and all of that. So we just kind of put the group on hiatus. Stopped taking on new cases. We would go out occasionally at Fort Gamble and that sort of thing. That was fine. And it was around that point that we started working with the property management company around the idea of doing a conference. That was their idea, to actually have a conference there in Fort Gamble. And it was also around that time that I was contacted by a local community college asking if I would be interested in giving a lecture on paranormal phenomena. And I told them, well, I'll do you one better. I'll give you, like an evening class if that's what you want. And they got very excited about that. And I developed this whole curriculum. And basically, again, I overdo everything. So everything, it was supposed to be like a 2-hour lecture, and it turned into this 9-hour class on paranormal investigation called Dark and Stormy Nights. And it ran around the Halloween season, and we were just supposed to run it once, and it was so popular that we just kept renewing it and running it. And
that's awesome. And
it was great, because the thing is that it was at that point that you had Paranormal State, and you had Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures and everything. It was just all over the board. Information and misinformation and disinformation about what paranormal investigation is, and all the kinds of things that we do out in the field. So this was my chance to kind of set the record straight, from somebody who had been in the field for a while.
And from me and all the other folks that are out there that align with the way I think, thank you for doing that. The more we can spread that real knowledge and try to shed some of this fantasy that I think people, who sit in their chairs or on their couches and watch these shows and feel like, oh, this is how paranormal research or quote unquote ghost hunting is done. It's a far stretch from it. So I appreciate you doing that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to continue to do it. I had no idea when I started that class that I would be doing this 6-7 years later, and have a DVD, an educational DVD on it as well. But the response to that was what really surprised me, because there were a lot of people that were taking the classes that knew what they were seeing on television was not really what was going on. That was very sensationalized, very Hollywood, but they didn't know where else to go for information.
Right.
Unless
they're damn sure to get it from Sci-Fi or the Travel Channel or whoever else. Any of those. They want the wool pulled over your eyes because that means more viewership.
Exactly. Nobody knows to go to the Ryan Research Center or the Parapsychological Association or the Institute of Noetic Sciences and look through all of their research and what they do and take part in all of that kind of thing.
Well, and on that, if you wouldn't mind, why don't we talk about parapsychology, some of its history, some of the terms that are used, and some good to knows about that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, no problem. I kind of have to start off by saying I'm not a parapsychologist. I don't have a degree in parapsychology. In order to do that, I'd have to go abroad. But I am a parapsychological consultant and educator, and in order to get to that point, I had to educate myself. One of the things that I learned was that basically there is a definition for parapsychology. It isn't just the study of the science of paranormal phenomena or psychic phenomena, or what are oftentimes called psi phenomena, but you can kind of define what parapsychology is by what it doesn't study. So parapsychology, we don't study cryptids. So we're not looking at Bigfoot. We're not looking at the Loch Ness Monster or Mothman. Nothing wrong with those. I'm a big Sasquatch fan myself. We don't study UFOs, alien abduction, crop circles, that kind of thing. We're not doing the divination, tarot, Wicca, neo-pagan stuff. That's again not part of what parapsychology is. Essentially, what parapsychologists have been studying for the last 100+ years is what people probably are commonly calling ESP phenomena, extrasensory perception, psychokinesis phenomena, otherwise known as mind over matter, and then phenomena that relate to or suggest survival of bodily death.
Now, would you say that end of it, would that be coined more like supernatural phenomena? I mean, what I'm getting at is like, if you were to sit down and answer questions abroad from folks, and as you're fielding these questions, somebody says, okay, but does parapsychology cover then, supernatural phenomena?
Usually I ask what they mean by supernatural phenomena, but I have the assumption that they're talking about ghosts, poltergeists, that sort of thing. And the answer to that, the short answer is yes, parapsychology does study those things, very, very much so. But it does it in a sort of a roundabout way. In other words, what we know about, say, hauntings at this point is that it looks like most haunting phenomena, which is that repetitive phenomena that just keeps happening, doesn't try to interact with you. It's like watching a movie. Those types of phenomena are essentially ESP-related phenomena. So telepathy and clairvoyance, remote viewing, those things fold into and can actually explain the phenomena that we know as haunting. Same thing with poltergeist phenomena. Poltergeist phenomena is generally agreed upon at this point to not be a separate type of a ghost or demonic entity, but an actual living person who has latent psychic ability, in this case, psychokinesis or PK ability. So they're just unconsciously moving things around with their mind. So absolutely, parapsychology does study what a lot of people consider supernatural phenomena.
So a side question to that would be, and this is kind of putting you on the spot, do you believe in ghosts? And when I mean, like, when I say ghosts, do you mean, or what I mean is, I die and now I'm a spirit that intelligently roams about a home or a piece of property, and I can see the living coming, to and from and doing their daily thing. And at times I try to interact or try to get their attention. Do you believe that there's a such thing as that?
Personally, yes, absolutely, I do. And professionally, I have to take it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I've had enough experience with those cases to know that I can say, yeah, there is evidence that suggests that what we call apparitions do exist and that they can interact, that they don't move on or go on after they die, and some of them hang around for a really long time for various reasons. Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, that's actually how. The funny thing is that we think about parapsychology today as being a lot of lab work and a lot of statistical analysis, which it is. But where it started was in the field, doing what all paranormal investigation groups are doing now. That was the mid to late 1800s when the spiritualist movement was in full swing, and a group of scholars basically got together and said, we need to investigate what these mediums are claiming they're able to do in seance rooms, and a host of other phenomena. So,
and basically expose some of the charlatans, as well as try to study that phenomena that may in fact be there,
and validate it if possible. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that's really where it started. So it's kind of an interesting full circle that we've got going on now, that basically what was called psychical research, which became parapsychology, started in the field, doing what we're doing, going out, investigating apparitions and poltergeists and hauntings. And then it went through a period of very intensive lab analysis and statistical analysis and research. And now here we are again, kind of back in the second golden age of spiritualism, if you will. A lot of people have termed it that. And there is the following of going back out into the field and doing more field research. And I think it's done more intelligently now, or at least,
Right.
by more people.
Or a little bit more, of a methodical approach.
Well, they were pretty
at least,
methodical back then, but I think the addition of technology, and I think just the knowledge that we've been able to categorize a lot of these things and observe over 100 years worth of these phenomena counts for an awful lot.
Right.
So we're just, I'm always kind of quick to say I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here. Whether we're talking about Lloyd Auerbach or Tony Cornell or D. Scott Rogo or William Roll, all the way back to Harry Price and whatnot. These people were doing their field research. They were out there in the trenches doing all of that stuff, just like we're doing today. So
and for our listeners' sake, you just threw out several names there. Could you give just, a real brief, okay, this person was this person and they were a part of this real quick?
Harry Price was a member of the Society for Psychical Research back in the early 20th century. He did a number of investigations. Probably his most famous was that of the Borley Rectory, which he termed the most haunted house in England. And there was a book that he wrote to that effect. William Roll, in the 1970s and the 1980s, he's one of the chief reasons that we know what we know about poltergeist phenomena today. He was in on the ground floor of several famous cases and wrote the book, basically, The Poltergeist. I suggest everybody go out and get a copy and read it. It's kind of mandatory reading if you're into this. D. Scott Rogo, another 70s, 80s psychical researcher, did a lot of work with psychic phenomena, out-of-body experience, near-death experience, that sort of thing. And of course, we all know Lloyd Auerbach has written several books.
I own at least 2 of them myself.
About doing paranormal investigation and research and that sort of thing, and tying parapsychology into it. So these are names that should be familiar to any paranormal investigator who's listening right now. And if they're not familiar, oh boy, do yourself a favor and go out and read their work, because it's astonishing.
It is. Not only will it fuel your interest, I believe very much so, in this field, but it's just you're gonna constantly find yourself gravitating to learn more about it. It kind of sucks you in. Those who take that time to read and research are of a different mentality state than those who just go out and do for themselves, on a more I'm hoping this is the right word, more on a more visceral level. At any rate, I think that's a good stopping point for a halfway mark. I'd like to take a break at this point, and then we'll come back and maybe touch a little bit more on that, and then move into some of the other topics. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to ASEP Radio. My name is Ben Robinson. I'm your host, and tonight's guest is Neil McNeill. So, Neil, we kind of stopped there with a little bit of, we were kind of going into the history, some of the names associated with parapsychology. You were talking about Harry Price and some of those fine gents who have helped shape what is now, coined as psi in general. So if you wouldn't mind, kind of pick back up there and kind of, run us up to the edge of 2014 of who's who with regards to that, I guess.
Veritable who's who. Well, Yeah, I think before the break I mentioned we had psychical research that took us up to about the 1930s, and then at that point there was something kind of remarkable that happened. For the first time ever, you could say, arguably, we had a laboratory that was dedicated specifically to studying these phenomena, and that was at Duke University. Became known as the Rhine Research Lab because the gentleman in charge was Joseph Banks Rhine, J.B. Rhine. And for 20 or 30 years, that was kind of the name in parapsychological research. That's actually where we got the name parapsychology. It was changed from psychical research. And an interesting thing happened at that time. There was a shift in what was being studied. They weren't so much interested anymore in mediumship, in survival of, personality beyond the death of the body, because those things weren't truly quantifiable, and they really wanted to stick to pure science at this point. So what they were looking at were the phenomena that they could, for all intents and purposes, put under the microscope and have some hope of actually proving that something did exist. So this is where we get sort of the divvying up of the phenomena into extrasensory perception and psychokinesis came from the Rhine Lab research.
I was just going to say, do you think that the pressure, or there was pressure, if known at all, or factors? You were talking about survival of personality, from the physical body, and basically, mediumship and charlatans and all that kind of stuff were not quantifiable. I shouldn't have said charlatans, but just, those things were not quantifiable. Do you think there was pressure from either J.B. Rhine or Duke or maybe the science community?
I think
that is why they chose to go and stick to something that they could get metrics behind and, data to back up.
Yeah, you pretty much hit the nail on the head. That was how science was going at that point. It was not acceptable to study these kinds of things, to study stuff that was paranormal.
Right.
So if you were going to have any kind of future as an academic, if you were going to be able to do this sort of thing, you had to fit it, you had to shoehorn it within the constraints of what science was saying was acceptable at those points.
Right.
So you were, which is hence the psychology part, basically a fair psychology. There's a good reason for that name, but that I don't want to say necessarily legitimized it, but it made it a little bit more acceptable and a little more palatable to the general science and academic community. There was a lot of pressure at that point. If I'm fond of saying, if you wanted to commit career suicide as a scientist, you went into parapsychology.
Right.
I've
heard that.
If you wanted to commit career suicide as a parapsychologist, you went into survival research because nobody was doing that. So you had from like the 1930s to maybe the 1960s, there was a good 30, 40-year period there when it was not acceptable within the scientific community, even within parapsychology, to study apparitions, hauntings, poltergeists, out-of-body experience, near-death experience. That wasn't acceptable because, again, you couldn't really quantify it. There wasn't the evidence. There wasn't the research being done. We get some milestones that happen in there. You get something like, say, Dr. Raymond Moody putting out the book Life After Life in 1975, where he did a meta-analysis of over 150 cases of near-death experience. That gave it some legitimate research behind that particular topic, and that sort of opened the door then to the idea that, maybe these phenomena really, they aren't just the silly charlatans who are trying to pull the wool over people's eyes in dark rooms around the table with a crystal ball. There might be more stuff, there might be something more to this particular set of phenomena. So you get sort of a resurgence of interest in going back into the field and looking into haunted houses,
right,
and looking into reports of ghosts. One of the big names that I can think of, Gertrude Schmiedler, who basically pioneered the use of psychics and mediums in-field investigation. People were not trusting psychics or mediums to give accurate information. But she developed a controlled way of introducing them into that investigation process, and we use that process today. It's the same process we use today. So, with all of these different interests coming back in with regard to what you had termed earlier supernatural phenomena, the interest level picked up again. And the next milestone to that, honestly, was Ghostbusters. Big cultural phenomena. You had this movie that was very popular all over the world. It did a couple things. It made people want to go out and do it. For one thing, everybody wanted a proton pack.
Yeah.
Go out and trap it.
Even Bobby Brown. Bobby Brown even asked for one in the second Ghostbusters. I think for a family member or something.
And the other thing that Ghostbusters did was to make light of what up until that point had only been portrayed as very scary phenomena.
Yeah.
If you think about it, the public mindset, everybody was watching The Exorcist or, The Omen, The Shining, all of those movies. If it had anything to do with paranormal, right, it meant scary. Ghostbusters kind of broke that myth and made it a humorous thing. And honestly, between that, Lloyd Auerbach's book, ESP Hauntings and Poltergeists, A Parapsychologist's Handbook, when that came out, Newsweek named it, basically the ghost hunting Bible, and it still is. That's when the interest picked back up in going back out into the field and really taking a look at field investigation from a scientific point of view. It wasn't that people hadn't been doing it to that point. It just was not in the public eye or the academic eye for them.
But I still believe that Ghostbusters is real. Everything in that is actual fact.
Well, it is. They just don't want that little tidbit getting out.
I believe there's a Slimer somewhere, and I think it's usually a small child that lives in whatever home I seem to frequent, and that's going to be that ghost.
Do you get the child? I usually get the dogs. That's what.
Oh, yeah, those would be wicked.
I get slimed by the dogs. That's my...
Yeah. So, obviously there's many, many thoughts and many, many theories out there. I like to try to, see what some of my colleagues, friends, guests feel, their feelings are about certain concepts or theories there is out there. And some of them that I'm personally involved in and researching a bit. Are you familiar with the universal mind theory?
I am, actually.
Okay.
I am familiar with it. You had spoken at the Oregon Ghost Conference. Did a great presentation on that. Do you want to give a little synopsis?
Well, yeah. I mean, essentially, it all for me kind of started from seeing a photo floating around on Facebook. When this photo showed like Jason Hawes and some other individual investigating, or at least it purports that they're investigating that some, hundreds of year old German castle, and that they're speaking to the spirits in English. And it kind of implied that they were idiots doing so. And that's a different topic in its own. Yeah, I'm not going to. But from a 10,000 foot view, I stopped and I thought, well, wait. I know for a fact that I've had cases that there's been things that sounded like foreign language to me, a language I did not understand or know how to speak and read or write. And so it made me, just want to go down that path. And really what it in kind of a nutshell, the universal mind theory is the belief that when we die, and actually there may be some ties to even psychic abilities to the universal mind theory, I believe, for the living, that you're able to access this almost like cloud-based for a modernized term, database of sorts, or this is archived area where you can, maybe even a better way to put it is, if you've seen the movie Matrix, where Neo gets put strapped down in that chair and they plug that big needle into his head and he's like, I know Kung Fu, right? So I know how to fly a helicopter. I know German. I know, Spanish, whatever. I think that's what the universal mind theory is similar to. It's the ability to tap into it and commune or receive messages from other folks who speak different languages natively and respond back in that. So I'm kind of curious.
I think it's a great theory. I really do, and it's interesting because it has elements of a number of other theories or ideas. I think that have kind of passed around over the years. You mentioned the idea of this of like a cloud. It's not unlike, using a technological term. It isn't unlike the idea of having the collective unconscious, that there is this sort of storehouse or warehouse of all human knowledge. Right. Whether you call that the Akashic records or whether you call it collective unconsciousness, that there is this knowledge somewhere out there, and that we're able to tap into it, both while we're living in the physical world and potentially afterward. So it fits right in line with a number of other ideas and theories. It's a very elegant idea, and I really think that there's a lot to it. I think from my point of view, of course, being steeped in psychical research and parapsychology, there's a model for communication with apparitions, and this kind of bleeds over into ITC and EVP. In that it isn't necessarily an acoustic signal that you're getting. Okay, it's an electronic signal that you're getting, the E and EVP. Right. The parapsychological model as to how basically spirits are able to communicate with us is that it is mind-to-mind communication. Mm-hmm. It is telepathy. It is what we know of as mental telepathy.
And would you agree that's for general purposes, that is a signal transmission between two different brains or minds?
Between two different minds, two different consciousnesses. That's the technical definition of it. And it's interesting in that with telepathy, it isn't in studies, and we've had studies that kind of prove this at the University of Washington here. They're doing research in telepathy, that you don't necessarily get a verbatim translation. It's not a word for word. This is the sentence that I'm thinking, and it's going directly into your brain. It's more of the sense or the feeling, the interpretation of what the other person is trying to communicate. Okay. It can include very specific commands or ideas that can be communicated pretty clearly, universally. I think so. Using that model, it is not it's not beyond reason to say that if I've got a ghost, if I've got an apparition that's trying to communicate with me, and they are speaking Swahili, it doesn't matter what language either of us is speaking. The essence of what they are trying to get across is going to come through, and my interpretation is going to put it into English. I'm going to understand it that way.
I wonder too if there's like correlation and some kind of tie. Again, this is a topic I'm constantly churning and just thinking through, and maybe even trying to play with some other concepts that may come in. But as investigators, there's been times where I've walked in one room of a house and I'm like, all right, it's really placid, nothing going on. You walk in another room, and for those that don't know, I don't believe that I have any kind of psychic abilities that I've tuned. I think I have them like most people can or do possess, but I just haven't really fine-tuned them a whole lot. And so sometimes you know, and I know people who are just like, I'm not psychic at all, whether they've shut that even that possibility off, you know, they've just shut it down altogether. They've had these experiences where they walk in another room and they're like, I'm getting like this feeling, you know, and I'm wondering if that's one of those moments where the living is actually interacting and being impacted, or they're picking up that ability of something via, you know, universal mind theory. Because in my explanation or understanding of the universal mind theory, I only address communication via words, you know. That's not to say that there's not this ability to do it via emotional or a physical level.
And I certainly don't want to suggest that the telepathic model is the only model, because obviously it doesn't cover every circumstance or situation. It doesn't always fit the evidence. I think there's probably more than one mechanism at work. So we're going to need multiple theories in order to cover all of the bases. Sure. But I really like the idea. I think it's a very elegant idea, and it certainly fits. It certainly fits some of the evidence that you and I have both seen and encountered.
What do you think about, you mentioned, you know, signal. Well, we both were kind of talking about that signal between two different consciousness minds. Some of the other stuff I've studied has helped lean towards, at least for me, seeing that there is some kind of tie with some kind of signal transmission, some kind of radio frequency, or you know, just energy of sorts that is heavily playing a part in what we believe to be supernatural phenomena. From a parapsychology aspect, would you say that is something that you could theoretically maybe get metrics or some kind of quantification to it?
Well, and here's the thing. I don't even think you have to go into parapsychology to do that, because just basic physics tells us that everything is energy. And energy is information. When you've got one energetic state going into another energetic state, it's passing information. Okay, that's the technical definition of what energy is actually doing. So when we say energy, we could just substitute the word information. So basically, everything, every molecule that is interacting with every other molecule, atoms interacting with atoms, subatomic particles with subatomic particles, that's all interaction. Everything in the universe vibrates. Everything has that energy. So it's information transfer that's happening all the time, 24/7. And as biological beings, we are giving off an enormous amount of energy just by the virtue of being alive. We're giving off enormous amounts of electromagnetism.
I think it's very and I think it's very underappreciated and under recognized, because one of my favorite ways to express this or to try to even explain it to people is how every person I've ever known can tell a story where they've walked into a room full of people and saw one person and they got this bad, as we call it, vibe from them, immediately didn't like them for whatever reason, just got something. And then a certain percentage of those people actually got to learn about that individual, and more often than not found that individual rubbed them wrong because of either characteristics or character flaws, clashes, you know, morals, ethics, things like that, whatever, religion, politics, didn't matter. That more often than not, they found that individual, you know, was not somebody that they wanted to be in association with. So yeah, I find it very fascinating.
There's interesting research out of the HeartMath Institute. Not that I want to go tangential, but it is pertinent to what you're saying. That research studies have shown that if you sit two people down in a room together and you've got them hooked up for EEG and EKG, within a very short amount of time, both their heart rhythm, the electrical signal, as well as the signal from the brain, the EMF signal from the brain, they're going to sync up. We each have an individual one at any given time. You put two people in the same room together, and within like 5 minutes, you've basically synced up. This works the best with people that already have a connection, but it can work with basically anybody. So we really are at a very, very primal level, energetically.
Yeah, we're connected,
up,
yeah.
or not, as the case may be. Yeah.
This is fascinating because, and we're going to talk about this offline when this interview's over, because I'm not ready to bring this out to folks, but I am working with some other individuals who I hold in high regard, and I think you and some of this information you just shared and your knowledge, it's kind of like a given. I'd like to maybe offer to bring you in on this if it can work out. So we'll talk about that offline, but very fascinating what you just mentioned. Okay, so I mean, we've obviously talked about quite a bit of stuff at this point. Some very, serious stuff with regards to, where you came from in this field and where you're at now. Some of what the knowledge that you have learned over the years. Some of your thoughts and theories on that stuff. The last theory I kind of wanted to talk about before we run into our next and last segment is one that I'm starting to tap into, and I have, about 3 or 4 months ago, I started studying it further, is deathbed visions. What are your thoughts and theories or just understanding of that?
Deathbed visions have been studied for a very long time, but it may not be the first, but one of the first concerted efforts to actually study them, again from a scientific point of view, was William F. Barrett. One of the original psychical researchers from the turn of the century, wrote a book, Deathbed Visions. It's just been reprinted. You can get a copy of it. That has case after case after case of people who are at or near the point of death, many of whom are comatose, non-responsive, in a great deal of pain, suddenly having a complete shift, almost in personality, if you will, because what they report is that somebody that they knew formerly in their life who had died is now in the room with them and is going to take them and guide them to the afterlife. It has an amazingly calming effect, very peaceful effect on people. And the skeptics usually say, well, that's, you've given them morphine, or you've given them, whatever other kind of...
The brain dying.
Yes, exactly. All these other...
Some of the side effects of that.
Come into play, that it's some safety mechanism that the brain kicks in. And in some cases, I would say that could be true, certainly possible, but not in the controlled studies that have been done. Those things have been accounted for, and yet people are still having these visions. One of the best examples that I know, I believe it was one that Barrett investigated originally, and hopefully I'm getting the details right. There was basically a woman who was at the point of death. She had just given birth. The child was okay, but the delivery was extremely difficult. She was bleeding out. They were not going to be able to save her.
Okay.
At the time, she became very calm because she said that I think it was her brother, was in the room with her and was going to take her to the other side, guide her to the afterlife, and make it a very peaceful transition so everything was going to be okay. Everybody tried to reassure her, your brother lives on the other side of the country. He's fine. He hasn't died. He's not here to take you away. Well, it turns out that an hour or so before this event, her brother had been killed, had died. Okay.
See, I haven't heard this one. This is crazy.
This is one of those tales that it's not apocryphal. This really was reported. It was looked into. It was researched, and it came up as being validated. So here you've got a prime example of a deathbed vision that can be verified. That it isn't just the drugs, that it isn't just hallucination, and oxygen, blood loss, whatever you want to throw at it. There was a measurable component to this that is really not explainable by conventional means.
And don't get me wrong, it's good for us to try to go through those motions to try to explain.
Absolutely, that's
exactly. Try to explain it. However, there's these kind of experiences or these stories, these claims, these just that are abound, and we have no way to fully explain why she would have seen her brother who had just died an hour prior, and nobody knew this, and here he is escorting her on. In my research, I've definitely seen Barrett's name come up as being probably the most devoted studier of deathbed visions that I've seen documented out there. And I've heard family talk about stories like this. I think almost anybody could reach out across, their family and ask, hey, did grandma or grandpa or Uncle Pete or whoever, did anybody ever have any weird thing happen that as they were dying, from whatever, didn't matter if they were old, young, whatever, if they could talk or, were of an age that they could, speak to us, they were able to communicate, and we witness, or they witnessed this event take place where they saw somebody that was deceased, show up.
A lot of the stories that we're getting today, I mean, we have those family stories, and those are wonderful. They're anecdotal. So how much, is that going to stand up under close scrutiny?
Right.
I would believe it if it was happening to me and my family. Could I have that stand up in a court of law? Probably not.
Right. Come on, Judge. I really mean that he was there and he helped me steal the money just as I thought I was going to die.
The deathbed vision combat.
Yeah, right.
But some of the best evidence that we're getting pointing to that today comes from nursing facilities, comes from hospice situations, comes from medical facilities where people are hooked up to monitoring devices that do have people that are documenting what's going on and what is being said, people that are present and witnessing this.
Yep.
In some cases, the people that are present actually see, along with the person who is dying. There are cases where you've got witnesses who are actually able to see something physical happening, whether that's a light, whether it's a figure, whether it's a temperature differential in the room.
Yeah.
At the time that the person is describing their loved one being present.
Right.
These things are actually happening. So,
and if I could ever line something up like that, it's so touchy, you know what I mean? Like hey, can I come in there while Fred passes?
Yes, while somebody's dying.
And I just want to measure the room and see. But I believe that opportunity will provide itself. It'll probably be likely folks that are passionate believers in the afterlife and know that I'm a respectable individual and would come in and be there. It would be interesting to have an opportunity, even with one individual, to have equipment running to see if you can capture any changes in as much of a controlled environment as you could in a scenario like that. Would be fascinating, I think. But yeah, I really appreciate your information, insight, and knowledge on that. It's something I find very valid. It happens quite often, well, daily. Maybe not even documented, but it's definitely happening. So
It's I just finished teaching a class on the near-death experience this past weekend, and it's the same kind of situation. It's we do have actual research being done in emergency rooms, where people are being declared clinically brain dead and yet being resuscitated sometimes up to 90 minutes later.
Yeah.
And having these experiences, so the research potential is there. It's getting your foot in the door and figuring out how to do the study and making it work for everybody.
Right. One real quick thing, and I can't remember if you and I have ever talked about this in the past. We don't have to go into this on any depth, but my father has long, since the 70s at least, had a very sincere interest in, metaphysics. He turned me on, and I have yet to go through all of them, but he turned me on to the series of books called the Seth Material. Have you ever heard of those or even read them?
I've not read them myself, but yes, I've heard them.
Okay. What is your understanding of that whole... I don't even know if you want to call it a theory, because from the standpoint of the books and from what I've always understood, it's supposed to be, conveyed as being truth. Like, this really had happened. This is a fact.
It's, to me, again, the researcher part of me puts the brakes on just a little bit and says, okay, where's the source material?
Right.
What's the source for this material? And usually we find that it's somebody that is a channeler, so a medium who is acting as a conduit. And I'm all for mediums. I work with them all the time. But any good medium is going to tell you that they're not 100% accurate all the time.
Right.
Nobody is
right.
in whatever profession. But nobody is going to be 100% accurate all the time. So when I read things that we've channeled from this particular entity or this particular guide, and this is the way it is, to the point where it almost becomes a belief system, where it almost becomes dogma.
Yeah.
I say let's stop before it goes too much further. That isn't to impugn the books, the work. A lot of people work with that material, find it exceptionally useful, exceptionally truthful. If it's not hurting anybody and you're getting something out of it, go for it. And really, it doesn't really matter where the info is coming from. If it's making a positive impact in your life, that's all the justification you need.
Yeah. And
so,
it kind of reminds me, I'm not saying that these are similar, but like when you see, I guess, the ego, sometimes that can come along with some of this, like Jay-Z Knight, how she, is supposedly even fought in court to be the only allowed person to channel Ramtha. Gets a little ludicrous to me, and I'm kind of like, okay, you need to stop with the ego. And it seems like it. What was that?
I was going to say, think about it. If that's true, you've got copyright laws in the afterlife, which is going to make lawyers really happy.
For Christ's sakes, I mean, that's just getting out of control. Yeah. So I mean, and then think about it this way. I mean, okay, you got copyright, infringement going on with the afterlife. Well, what about the Bloods and the Crips? Are they still, gang banging in the afterlife? I mean, Jesus, I don't know when it stops.
Yeah, it's got to stop. Some things are best left unknown.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd like to roll into the last segment, and it's, it is what it is. It's the talking shit segment. All that means is really, we're just going to be talking loosely about, anything and everything. It could be from the music you enjoy listening to things you see going, south in this field of research, or things that should be done that haven't been done, anything and everything. So first off, and I haven't asked this for quite a while. Matter of fact, you're the first since my very first guest, which was Casey Goodwin. What kind of music are you into?
I stopped listening to music in 1983.
Worst question ever. Moving on.
Well, I used to be a radio DJ, right? So I've worked all different formats. I've done adult contemporary. I've done classic rock. I've done country, Motown, and soul. About the only thing I didn't do was rap because I couldn't pull that off. For such a long period of time, it was over a dozen years that I was doing work as a DJ.
Sure.
You burn out on music after a while.
I could imagine.
Like with anything else. So it was my life, 24/7. You were always listening to what was coming out next, and you were always paying attention to what other radio stations were playing and what other DJs were playing and all that kind of stuff, which in and of itself was fun. But you do get to a point where you just don't want to listen to anything anymore. Having said that, I've got a number of different things in my CD rotation. But
what are CDs?
What's that?
What are CDs?
What are CDs? It's when the big black record CDs, they got really small.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I know. I'm, as I said before, I'm not a tech person. I still have phonograph records, and still love the pop.
They came back though. They came back big.
Well, they did. It was a fashion thing.
Yeah.
There you go. I still, mostly what I listen to actually is classic rock. The era I was growing up in was the 70s. And so two older sisters, they were always listening to Boston, Styx, the Eagles, so I'm a big fan of all those bands. And so I'm always playing their stuff. At the other end of the spectrum, my husband is actually a kind of a classical musician. He's a harpist. Specializes in a number of different kinds of music, and actually turned me on to early music, music of the medieval period, music of the Renaissance, which is something I never thought I'd be listening to, but I really enjoy it. There's quite a bit of it that I do.
See, you listen to music.
I do. But the thing is that I don't listen to it at home. That's the funny thing, is that I live in an apartment. I don't want to play my records too loud, that kind of thing.
Sure. When
I used to listen to music was when I was commuting.
Right.
Because I had an hour commute from Seattle to Bellevue, and so I was always listening to music. I don't have that commute anymore because I work from home. So I don't really listen to music anymore.
Well, nothing wrong with that either. I mean, there's often times I listen to music pretty regularly, but there's times where I just absolutely love it to be quiet. Just don't need music at all. So I can appreciate that too.
I do karaoke, however, as you well know.
That's
and
right.
One of these days, we're going to get you on the mic.
You do not. You and my girlfriend, man, you're going to gang up on me. I know what's going to happen.
We're gonna put your name in the rotation. You're going to end up doing Copacabana or something.
You want your ears to bleed. That's what you want. But and actually, a lot of people don't know this, but during the Oregon Ghost Conference earlier this year, you and I shared a hotel room. So we got to, every night after the Ghost Conference, you and I sat down unwinding, and we just sat there and talked.
It was a blast.
I loved it.
Everybody else was getting tanked in the...
I know, right?
And we were just having these incredible conversations that were going until 2 a.m.
I absolutely... That was probably one of my favorite moments to the whole, time there at the Ghost Conference was our philosophical discussions. It was great.
My only regret was that we were not recording it.
That's true, right?
I kind of wish we had a transcript, because some of the ideas were pretty amazing.
It was actually really good, and it was so organic, so unplanned. We both just were talking. I think most of the time we were referring to some of the lectures we had heard, or things we had were thinking about, or whatever, and it just went from there, and it was really great combo.
it's kind of hard to be in that environment all day when you've got all these great ideas from the paranormal world coming at you, and it's just kind of all percolating, and then you finally get some quiet time, and suddenly you want to talk about it.
That was honestly some great conversation, and you're right. It's very unfortunate we weren't recording that, because some very good stuff. So, kind of curious, from the grand scheme of the paranormal field, what do you think we're doing poorly right now, from your observations?
In
research.
In research from paranormal investigators, like investigation groups, what's actually being done that's wrong?
Yep.
Okay. Interesting. You should ask that, and I'll tell you why in a second. I think I'm all about education. I'm teaching classes. I'm trying to educate people on what parapsychology is and why it is important to have a background in it if you're going to get into the field of ghost investigation.
Okay.
So I think that is first and foremost the one thing that is lacking the most. We're making a little headway in that regard. We're making inroads. But I still see a lot of misinterpretation going on, a lot of misuse of terminology.
Yeah.
That goes on. And it isn't that it's wrong to use, either your homemade terms or the ones that you see on television. It isn't that that's wrong. But if you're going to be doing scientific research, if you're really wanting to be taken seriously, if you want your evidence and your data to be seen as legitimate, you really need to start using legitimate terminology. And there is terminology that we've had for over 100 years, and I don't think most people are aware of that.
Or even try. That's the other problem, is I don't think a lot of people are trying to learn it. They just watch the shows and they go off that, or somebody throws a term at them here and there and they go with that, but they don't actually research what it means.
I got drawn into a rather long circular conversation with somebody at one point on this very topic a couple of years ago, that they were, I was arguing for the idea that we really need to honor where this stuff has come from, and you need to know the terminology, you need to know what parapsychology studies. And they were actually saying all of that is outdated, it's no longer relevant. We don't need the lexicon, we don't need the terminology anymore. And I just thought, wow, I'm done, for one thing, because I can't carry the conversation any further than that.
Yeah.
And it just struck me as being so unfortunate that people will just kind of close the door because it's old.
Again, I see that as being egotistical, to take that kind of mind state and mentality. It's not like we're talking about, well, this could open up a whole different doorway, but it's not like we're taking, what am I trying to say here? We're not trying to apply our lives to the Bible, or like a lot of people do, to modern day lifestyle or modern day, culture and things like that. That to me in some ways is a whole different outdated mentality. And I'm not egotistical when it comes to religion or any of that. I think that would make more sense, I guess, if you were to try to apply that kind of mentality and that kind of a statement than you would to paranormal research, I think.
Yeah, so. And it's not as if I'm trying to convert, people or force people to educate themselves when they really don't want that. There's room for everybody and all different points of view, and we don't have any set answers. We've got some really good guesses, but basically the whole field is still up for grabs to some degree. Mm-hmm. But I think by and large, the response that I've gotten, I've been doing this for quite some time, doing the lecture circuit, doing the cons, talking with people and teaching classes, and people generally are very open to the idea. They're very surprised to find out that there's been over 100 years worth of investigative process invested in this already. And
Hell, for that matter, even when I started getting into it formally back in 2007, um, I was surprised too. I didn't know that this had been going on, so I could totally see that.
a lot of people, it's not that their education starts and stops with popular culture, but popular culture doesn't allow for a lot of other alternatives, a lot of other avenues to explore when you're looking for information. Yeah, we've got the internet. It's wonderful if you know how to use it, if you
Or what to look for. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Inquiring minds want to know, so they're going to get out there and find it one way or another, whether there was an internet or an encyclopedia or people.
Yeah. This is a topic that's good timing, because next month I'm going to be down in San Francisco for the Parapsychological Association conference, the annual conference of the PA. And for those who aren't in the know on that, the PA is the clearinghouse for all things scientifically paranormal, for parapsychology. This is where all of the research is being done, and these are the people that are doing it. And I'm very happy to be able to participate this year. I'm co-chairing a panel on education in parapsychology with Lloyd Auerbach at that conference next week, and these are the things we're going to be talking about.
See, I'm so happy for you. I'm so proud of you. I am so goddamn jealous. I have people I could stay with in San Jose. I would love to go down and do that. That would be epic. I'm really glad that you have this opportunity. I think your hard work and everything is really paid off, and this is why this kind of thing is in front of you and now, laid in your pathway. So anyways, you were saying...
No, I appreciate it. I really do. And this is kind of the opportunity that I've been waiting for with all the work that I've been doing in paranormal education, because I've always seen my role in this as a bridge between the amateur ghost investigator, the folks that are going out on the weekends and doing this, and whether that's the weekend warrior or the more serious investigator, and the halls of academia, the parapsychologist doing the statistical analysis and whatnot. It's to act as a go-between, because there is a gap. There is, in the academic circles, we don't necessarily want to take into account what's being done at the ghost hunter level. At the ghost hunter level, they don't necessarily want to read dry, dusty papers and abstracts about statistical significance and PK studies, that sort of thing. But the information is necessary for both camps, and so one of the things that I'm hoping to do is bring some of that, inject some of that into the panel discussion, and show that both sides have information that the other side really needs, and that we need a common language, we need a common set of theories, we need to standardize things just a little bit.
Yeah.
At the same time, make that available to everybody. Because
I'd like to point out too, out of appreciation for what you just said to the listeners, that if you pay attention to what Neil had just said, he started off talking about ghost investigators, and then he also differentiated that by saying ghost hunters, and there is a difference between those folks. I know a lot of people throw that phrase around loosely. A lot of people mean it, affectionately, but
yes,
there is for the folks that are out there really doing this, that are legitimately trying to be a part of this field of research, we are not fans of the phrase ghost hunter. But you talk about how, even though, sure, yeah, I may not like the ghost hunters out there in the world, right? But there is still something that has to be addressed, and still something that needs to be talked about with regard to those folks and the other folks out there that are doing legitimate research, and hopefully help raise the bar, standardize things, get some common core fundamentals, I guess, in place.
the DVD that I put out about 2 years ago, there's a reason that I call it Dark and Stormy Nights Parapsychology for Ghost Hunters.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I'm trying to do is bring that information to the people that, it's the ghost enthusiast. It's somebody that just has maybe a passing interest in the thing. Maybe they want to go on an investigation once or twice in their lifetime. Otherwise, they're fine to sit home and watch Ghost Hunters or Ghost Adventures, whatever. That's fine. I don't honestly have a problem with that. But what I'm trying to do is make sure that everybody's got the same information. So
I see it, and had I not read this book, I'll mention here in a minute, prior to seeing your DVD title and everything, I don't know how I would have viewed it, especially maybe not knowing you. However, that's a part of this whole thing is growing and learning and having a little bit more understanding all the way around of things. I see when you titled that DVD, that it was a marketing technique, so that way you could capture the eye of the armchair jockey, that watches the shows but really doesn't know anything about paranormal research. Michelle Belanger, who I am a big fan of, she wrote a book, and it's the worst titled book when you read the actual book. Worst title because of what I expected when I saw it. It's called The Ghost Hunter's Survival Guide. Excellent book. I highly recommend it to everybody. However, looking at it, I'm like, it's really, or after reading the book, you're like, it's really not labeled appropriately. But I see what Michelle was doing. She was trying to market the book and appeal to more people. She knew that people would use the phrase, and I've heard her talk, and I know where her stance is on this, so I know that she's not under the guise of, ghost hunting is the thing, right?
Well, and not that I want to speak for anybody else, but the last couple of books that Lloyd Auerbach has put out have the term ghost hunter in it. I wrote an article about this for a magazine. The difference between, are you a ghost hunter? Are you a paranormal investigator? Is there a difference? Should there be a difference? In the end, there's a lot of people, and I think we're kind of getting onto the downside of this at this point. But for a very long time, there were so many investigators out there who were desperate for some kind of credential, for something that they could say makes me legitimate. And whether that was, we use all state-of-the-art technology, or we use this title, we put it on our business card, or we're all wearing polo shirts with, monograms on it, whatever. There's a need to set themselves apart, make themselves individual, as well as have some kind of professional credential. And again, where do you go for a credential in this country? You don't, so you have to sort of make your own way, like I did. And it becomes a matter of semantics. I mean, I honestly don't. Yeah, there's a difference between people that call themselves paranormal investigators versus ghost hunters. Is it an earth-shattering difference? No, it's not. We're all in it for the same thing. We're all in it to find an answer. We're looking for something. Again, check your motivation. That something could be just a weekend thrill, or it could be really hard evidence for the existence of something beyond death. But we're all in it because we enjoy it, because we have a need to find out more. That's the commonality of it. And if you want to divvy it up into different categories, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. So yeah, again, you're absolutely right. It was a marketing thing when I used that particular title, because I wanted it to appeal to as wide an audience as I possibly could, because I really felt essentially the information that was there was so necessary to everybody. It doesn't matter what their level of expertise is. The information that I provide is just as useful to the armchair enthusiast or the weekend warrior as it is to the person who's been doing this for 15 years, and is working at very high end.
And that's very valid points. Yeah, I like that. So, last thing I was going to ask about is I kind of want to know what your feelings, and it kind of ties with what we're talking about. What is your feelings on mainstream Hollywood portrayals of paranormal in general? Not just paranormal research, but supernatural phenomena. Yeah, any of that.
Wow, Hollywood has been making money off of the paranormal for decades. I think it's time they give back.
Yeah, right.
It's impossible to get a research grant in parapsychology. Let's get it funded by Hollywood. How about that?
No joke, right?
Yeah, somebody actually was I had a client ask me this just this afternoon. They said, "Oh, have you seen that movie, The Conjuring?" And without getting into muckraking or anything like that, I said, "No, I haven't." And they look surprised because they know that I do this for a living, and they said, "I'm really surprised that you haven't seen it. Is there any reason why?" I said, "Yeah, they didn't get it right." I know enough about the background of the story. I know what they've done with the story, that it is a very sensationalized version of an already sensationalized case involving a very sensationalized couple of investigators. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's all I'll say on that. But that is what Hollywood does. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about cable television, whether it's plumbers doing paranormal investigation, or whether it's Steven Spielberg blowing up somebody's closet. They never really get it right. There are very few movies that I can point to, or television programs that I can point to, that I can say, watch this. They actually get it right here. Very good.
Would you say then that like Hollywood, mainstream, right? Hollywood and all that is essentially the modern day charlatan, king of charlatans, like the modern day Fox sisters. I'm not trying to debate whether or not get into it if folks believe that the Fox sisters were legitimate or not.
It's an excellent point, and it's an excellent observation.
It just seems like big network shows, Hollywood itself.
Well, yeah.
Hell, for that matter, YouTube. People now can run software on their computers, their phones, that fake this kind of stuff all the time. So I mean,
and make it really great. Yeah, no,
we got charlatans all around us.
You're absolutely right. Back in the day, the turn of the century, we're talking about mediums in the seance rooms, especially physical mediumship. A lot of it was just flat out hoaxing. It was stage magic hidden in the dark. And I would say that, a lot of the stuff that we're seeing on television, especially, and a great deal of what we see in the movies on the silver screen, that is charlatanism. It is sleight of hand and stage magic. I think there is a difference between the two mediums, though, two media, I should say. When you go to a movie theater, you're not necessarily expecting reality. For some
true, but let's take
television program. It's happening at the moment, and so there's.
I'll give you a couple examples though, where big time movies have pulled that shit on us. The Blair Witch.
Well, yeah.
They made a mockumentary. That's where the term actually, I think, came from. Mockumentary was a result of the Blair Witch during their marketing process for it. They were running this mockumentary on TV leading up to the movie Blair Witch. And then you had the fourth kind, which built fake websites. And I'm not saying that they're the only ones that have done this. There's probably been many that have, but they're the two that come to mind. The fourth kind actually built real websites out there that I think you might even still be able to access today that followed and backed up the story. And I remember even watching the movie going, I was a little bit hook, line, and sinker going, holy shit, this is no way.
Do you know?
Until I saw a certain scene, and then I was like, CGI. This movie's fake.
Do you know how many people I come across in my travels that aren't aware that the Amityville Horror was a hoax?
Oh, really? So, what is their understanding then, or what is their belief? I guess
they believe. If they don't believe the entire story, that's fine. Actually, that's good. But they believe that it was based on a true story. Therefore, whatever elements in that movie, could be taken as gospel truth or the possibility that these things could exist. And again, this is sort of like what the Warrens, in my opinion, have done over the years. They investigated the Amityville house among many other people that were doing investigation, parapsychologists included. They walked.
Hans Holzer was a part of that.
He was.
Yeah.
They walked in with the local news team because the news team wanted their Halloween story. And immediately everything was demonic. There were evil presences all throughout the house. And they are actually on record as saying that the house is built on Native American burial ground of a specific tribe, which is an absolute fabrication. And you go through the records. The Native American tribe that they were mentioning flat out, responded to that and said they don't know what they're talking about. We've never had a burial ground over there. That's not even our territory. So, they just kind of make these pronouncements. But it's that same thing that when you start to present something that has a hint of truth about it, that sticks in people's minds and allows.
So you're saying they took the DeFeo story, the actual murder, and twisted that to tie into this demonic hoax.
Yeah, I mean, not that I want to get into the whole Amityville thing, but
sure,
but in that particular case, yes. And they actually came forward at one point and said, we cooked this whole thing up with DeFeo's lawyer over a bottle of wine. A couple of parapsychologists found a movie and book contract on a desk in the house before all of this went public. So they were already in the process of involving the media and thinking about the money.
Sure.
And then again, a lot of the details that came out of that case didn't match weather reports and other things. There was just one falsehood after another that happened with that.
Neil, I got an idea. I know a house down the road. Okay.
Yeah.
That a murder happened in, and this is true. Okay. A family murder. I say you and I say that a Chinese tribe used to inhabit that area.
It was a Chinese gang.
Yes, a Chinese gang, and now there's a Chinese demon there.
Okay.
We'll have to cook on this later. Yeah. We'll get a bottle of wine and
we'll watch Big Trouble in Little China and get some.
There you go. I like it. We'll be rich before we know it.
That story, it'll make $1 million.
On a serious note, though, I'm going to have to wrap this up. But I want to end it on a quote of yours, if you don't mind me using it, that I love. And I feel like this is the essence, I think, of what we're talking about with parapsychology or paranormal research in a whole. So you said actual research into the paranormal is all about gathering quantitative data as well as qualitative experience. And I love that. I think that that's really, really, in many ways, the essence of what's going on here.
I don't want people to get the idea that I'm hard-nosed science and that, unless you can put it under the microscope, we can't use it as evidence. I'm psychic myself. I have to try to turn that off when I'm doing investigation, and I'm looking at it from the science point of view. But you need to have both sides. You need to have that scientific control looking into the phenomena. Mm-hmm. But you have to remember that at the heart of each one of these investigations is a ghost story, is somebody's experience. And that is your best piece of evidence, is the witness. And I think there's a tendency these days to overlook that part. You're there for the witness, you're there for the story. They're the ones that have the information to begin with. So you've got to balance both sides. You have to have, You have
Yeah.
to have both sides in order for the equation to work.
Yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time tonight to sit down and chat with me. Please thank your husband for letting us borrow you for the bit. I'd like for you to real quick let our listeners know how they could get in touch with you.
Great. They can go to neilmcneill.com. That's NeilMcNeill, 2 L's on that last name. They can do that, and they will find all kinds of information on my website about what I'm about, who I am, and especially the classes that I'm teaching. If I can give a plug to the next couple
Absolutely.
that I've got. Yep.
Please do.
On August 2nd, I have Anatomy of a Seance. This is a class that talks about psychical research from the seance rooms, what it was like to actually have the mediums do what they did, and where we are today because of all of that. That's happening up in Edmonds. And they can also check out on August 11th, I'm doing a short presentation called Watery Graves, Phantoms of the Deep.
Oh, wow.
This is because of Seafair. Decided it would be kind of a nice tie-in.
Yeah.
This is a topic that doesn't get talked about a lot. All phantom ships, ghost ships, haunted lighthouses.
Absolutely. I'm totally sitting here thinking, wow, that's be a neat conversation to have another time too.
Sure. Be happy to anytime.
Yeah.
So yeah, they can find those classes and more. They can find my DVD. Find me on Facebook, either Neil McNeill or Paranormal Studies. I'm there. You can friend me. Tell me that you heard me here on ASEP Radio, and be happy to add you.
And make sure you add that second L on his last name.
Yes.
And it's not Neal, it's Neil.
Yeah, I'm in the process. I'm going to change that so it's a little easier for people to find it.
Is there an email, Twitter account, anything else that you want to throw out there?
Yeah, they can email me at paranormal@clearwire.net. And that's basically it. I don't do the Twitter thing that much. I know I should, but like I said, I'm kind of backwards that way.
No, it's all good. There's only so much we can really wrap ourselves up into, and I think keep doing that to myself. I'm my own worst enemy there. I don't even want to get into it, but well, thank you. I want to give one quick shout out to Mike Smith over at the Info Sub. Please go check them out. You can check out their whole stock of programs and featured shows of sorts. You can find them on two places, their website or Facebook. On their website, it's infosub.listen2myradio.com, and on Facebook, it's Facebook.com/theinfosub. So please check them out. Thanks a lot, Mike, for broadcasting ASEP Radio, and Neil, thanks a lot. I'm glad our paths crossed. Consider you a great friend, a mentor in many ways. Even tonight, I learned more from you.
I'm honored.
Hell yeah! If you ever want to split costs on a hotel room in the future, I'm down, because I look forward to more, and we're going to record those next time.
Yes,
So I would love to have more conversations. So thank you very much for being on ASEP Radio, and I will be in touch with you soon to talk about that other thing that I mentioned earlier, all right?
Excellent.
All right, well, thank you for tuning in to ASEP Radio, and stand by for more great content.